Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. What would you do when you're talking to the FBI's one-time lead hostage negotiator and the number one negotiation coach in the world? Well, of course, you would try mock negotiating with him to see if you can win. Well, that's exactly what I plan to do with him here today. Do you think that I'm going to win? Let's see. Negotiate as if your life depended on it. You're learning how to do that today with the Never Split the Difference author Chris Voss and I find out how to never leave money on the table today on Get Rich Education. Hey, is your IRA in a real estate syndication? Yikes, a 37% UBIT tax could hit you, but you still have a chance to set up your EQRP and avoid this. Did you make too much money in 2020 and need more deductions? Now federal law lets you set up an EQRP in 2021 and get deductions for last year, retroactively. Even put old IRA and 401k money in Bitcoin, gold, or your own business. Get control of all of your retirement money, tax and penalty free. Text EQRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York to Vancouver Island, Canada, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. We're going to help you make sure that you never leave money on the table today. You know, I think that face-to-face negotiation has actually made a comeback in the last year. Now that Zoom video calls are everywhere, virtual face-to-face negotiations have become more common. Now, a lot of times when you think about negotiation, at least in the business world, you're thinking about price. If you're a buyer, how do I get the lowest price on this? The conventional wisdom, I think, says that you want the other side to name a price first and not you. But then you learn about a technique like anchoring. Well, then that might mean that you do go first. Anchoring, that's where if you're the buyer, you state quite a low price first, just not so low that you upset the seller, and then your final price could be more likely to settle close or anchor back to that lower price that you mentioned. I'll find out what today's guest, the number one negotiation coach in the world, Chris Voss, has to say about anchoring and who goes first in a negotiation. Now, I do plan to get in a mock negotiation with Chris about real estate today. Not only is that going to make it interesting for you to listen to, but I'm probably going to get a lesson that I'll never forget because I'm a participant inside it. And I've got to say, I don't realistically like my chances of winning. But hey, if he's number one in the world and I've got a chance to negotiate against him, I sure am going to try. I mean, look, if I've got a chance to sprint the 100-meter dash against the world's fastest man, call him Usain Bolt, then I sure am going to do it, even if my odds aren't good, because I can have that experience of challenging the best in the world. So I'm going to do that here. Now, any experienced real estate investor knows that buying a piece of real estate is often more about your terms than your price. Price still certainly matters, but say you're a buyer looking at a $500,000 property that's for sale. You might be happy if you ended up with something like paying more than the asking price. Say you paid $520K, but you locked it up with just a $10,000 down payment and a 3% fixed interest rate seller financed. And that way you can tell the seller that you'll ensure a fast close as well because you don't have to go through mortgage underwriting. See, and then you can also educate the seller on the IRS's positive tax treatment from you buying the property from them this way and how that's good for both of you. So that's an example of how terms are often more important to you than the overall asking price. And this way the seller got even more than their asking price, but yet you got what you wanted. Now you control a big piece of real estate with almost nothing out of pocket. Today's show is one that you're probably going to want to watch the video of. Yeah, you can see this entire interview with the face-to-face mock negotiation at our Get Rich Education YouTube channel. You're going to be able to see Chris Voss and I's facial expressions and body language there on the video as we learn from him. I, for one, expect to learn a lot from today's show, right along with you. A few years ago, we had the president of the American Negotiation Institute here, and now today, in more than 330 episodes of Get Rich Education, here is our second ever episode that's entirely dedicated to negotiation. Today, we are visited by the number one negotiation coach in the world. And how did he get to be that person? Well, he's been the lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. He's had other esteemed roles like this at the National Security Council. He was the lead crisis negotiator for the New York City division of the FBI, where he spent 24 years. He was also trained at Scotland Yard and at Harvard Law School. He has also taught business negotiation at the MBA programs at Georgetown and USC. He authored the mega popular book, Never Split the Difference. And what else makes him special is that with that book and courses and trainings that he offers, he brings all of this expertise to people just like you. And he's doing that here on GRE today. Welcome to the show, Chris Voss.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, let's discuss the importance of negotiation. Every day when someone tells themselves either I want something or I need something, they're probably beginning a negotiation, oftentimes without even realizing it. So talk to us about the relevance here, Chris.
The most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in. And as you just said, if the words I want or I need are either in your head or coming across your lips, you are in fact in a negotiation. You're saying it to somebody you're trying to get some cooperation from. If you get good long-term view, you want to at least preserve the relationship. You don't want it to get any worse than it is, because they're always going to have a chance to bite you back if you hurt the relationship. So yeah, negotiation and everything.
I'm glad you really mentioned about the outcome beginning with the end in mind, because as you set the table for a negotiation, I really think you want to come from the standpoint of win-win, right? We can both win in this negotiation because no one wants to be labeled as some bulldog negotiator or a selfish guy or, oh, that woman burns me in negotiations all the time. Or you don't want to get that, oh yeah, he's great at doing what's good for him. Those are the type of things that you don't want to sour the relationship.
Let me add some thoughts to two things you brought up, beginning with the end in mind and also win-win.
Yeah.
So beginning with the end in mind, that's a good idea, but never be so sure of what you want that you wouldn't take something better. So if you're too focused on an end goal, what that also means is you have tunnel vision and you're going to miss better deals. Now, as human beings, we feel very unsettled, very disruptive if we proceed in a very Zen-like fashion where I don't know where this is going to go. I'm open to anything. You know, most people can't do that. Most people need to have an end goal in mind to fix on. And that's good as long as your goal is to exceed that end. Then you're not constrained by that goal. So beginning with the end in mind is a human nature issue. And it's one of the interesting points when we wrote Never Split the Difference, my son and I, my son Brandon, uncredited co-author of the book, and Tal Raz. And in the book, Tal says, all right, so what are we going to tell people about goal setting? And we said, don't set a goal. And Tal's a genius dude. He's very analytical, knows human nature. He's like, hold on. You can't do that. Maybe you guys do that, but regular human beings got to have a goal. So we said, all right, your goal is to exceed your goal. I mean, you got to keep an open mind, and you got to understand that if you're really focused on a goal, you got tunnel vision. So that was the first point. Now, the other point that I want to talk about, use the term win-win. We don't use that terminology, although in point of fact, it's what we're talking about. Why don't we use that terminology? What stops us from it? Well, somebody who utters the words win-win in the first 60 seconds of a negotiation, I know is trying to pick my pocket. That is a dead giveaway, red herring sign. Somebody says, let's do a win-win deal. What they really mean is I win, you lose. I'm going to make sure I win.
Yeah.
So the concept I'm very supportive of, because if you leave the other side feeling like they lost, they are going to find a way to hurt you. Now, the articulation of it has become a dead giveaway for somebody's trying to pick my pocket, which is why we avoid the terminology, because I know right away, somebody says win-win, what they're going to do is they're going to high anchor on me. They are utterly predictable. You're going to high anchor. You're not going to expect to stop there. You're going to want to split the difference, meet in the middle, which is where you wanted to be the whole time. And you're conning me. That works on the average negotiator. On the A players, they smell it a mile away.
When it comes to beginning with the end in mind, yeah, I think you're helping us remember something important and something critical. And that is, don't see your best or your only outcome as something that's too narrow, or you could very well end up being disappointed or not getting what's ultimately best for you both.
Yeah, keep an open mind. There's always a better deal. Always. I can explain to you intellectually why that's true. I can explain it to anybody. A lot of people are like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I know what the deal is. The other side is always holding back something that could benefit you. Always. They always have hidden cards. Tell me a negotiation you were in where you didn't have hidden cards. People will, yeah, of course. I got deadlines. I got pressures. I got desires. I got all sorts of stuff that would open me up emotionally. Of course, I got hidden cards. Well, if you do, they do. So there's something they could do that you don't know about that could make the deal better, no matter how cut and dried you see it, which is why being wedded to an outcome can limit your thinking.
As we're setting the table here, we're a human being. The person you're negotiating with on the other side of the table is a human being. And
Right.
we often revert to these primordial emotions.
Yes.
And oftentimes
Yeah.
it's that fear of loss. Fear of loss
Yeah.
is what can make one nervous about going into a negotiation. So are there any ways to cope with that here as we're setting the table and thinking about going into a negotiation, whether that be tone of voice even or something else, Chris?
There's two aspects to coping with fear of loss. So that's two separate questions. Whose fear of loss are we coping with, ours or theirs?
Usually I would think of my own.
Yeah, okay, first, perfect, exactly. Your first step should be worrying about your own mindset. Not sometimes, all the time. Natural human default wiring, survival wiring, if we do nothing for our mindset, our survival wiring is 75% negative. Survival wiring is not success wiring. The caveman to survive had to be pessimistic. Otherwise, he didn't survive. We're not in a caveman environment now. Look anywhere. No one will ever tell you that success mindset and survival mindset are the same thing. They are different. So yeah, what do I do to get out of survival mindset and get into success mindset? The first one is ridiculously simple and simultaneously just as difficult to do. Pure curiosity. The curious mindset is like the secret emotional intelligence hack. Being in a curious mindset makes you smarter. You're actually a positive frame of mind. You're 31% smarter. Sean Acker, Harvard psychologist, The Happiness Advantage, TED Talk. That's the source of data. 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. Pure curiosity is very positive. So you're smarter when you're curious. You also can't get angry when you're curious. It's not possible to be angry or threatened when you're curious. I recently did this interview with this fascinating dude, Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis is a black musician that talks Ku Klux Klan members into quitting the Klan. Now, how does a guy talk a Klan member who's by definition kind of dedicated to hanging Daryl? How does Daryl not get triggered? We're having a conversation with Daryl. He grew up in an Air Force family, grew up all over the world. He actually has a very curious mindset. He looks at somebody who thinks differently of him. He doesn't see their hatred. He sees them as being from a different culture, and he's naturally curious. So he'll sit down with a Klan guys who've literally told him, I love your musical ability, but I hate you because you're black. And Daryl will be like, wow, how's it possible that you don't even know me and you hate me? That's pure curiosity. That's how he navigates this onslaught. That doesn't just work for Daryl. It's a human nature hack. You remain genuinely curious, you make better deals. And the other side will get a kick out of how you respond to them, because what it exudes from you is people feel drawn towards, and they want to talk, and their defensiveness comes down because they're not threatened by you in any way. When point of fact, you got to Curiosity is a shield of armor around you that is almost impenetrable. It's kind of crazy.
It's almost like a Dale Carnegie how to win friends and influence people thing. You're being curious. You're asking someone else about themselves, or you're asking someone else about their property. If I'm looking to buy a piece of real estate from you, being curious, you're gathering information at the same time. You're letting that person talk about themselves. People want to talk about themselves. So therefore, if you say the word you more often than the word I, you're letting that other party talk about themselves. That's what they want to do.
Well, depending upon the context, you drop in the words you and I in. Now, what you're grasping there is you is a quick attention getter for the other side, and I is a self-centering device.
Yeah.
Now, neither word are bad or good in and of themselves. It's very much the context it's in. Like if I say, you're really against this deal, and maybe a little bit of a jabbing. So I might say, seems like you're uncomfortable with this deal. A little softer. But each time the word you got you in a different way, but it engaged you. If you could say, look, I don't see it that way. I don't like it. That's a little self-centering. It depends upon when you drop it in. So both words actually phenomenally, subtly impactful. How you drop into a sentence, your gut instinct right now, Keith, is that you're aware that they're subtly powerful, and they are.
We're talking about setting the table for a negotiation, getting into a negotiation. I think there's one word that you like to bring up, and that is the word fair, F-A-I-R. You call it the F word.
Well, context depends upon whether or not I want to bring it up. You got to be aware of it.
Because that word can be used to manipulate people, because fair is quite a judgmental term.
Yeah. It's one of the most emotional terms in negotiation. And I think we got a list of the fair, price, value. First of all, fair always comes up. You're not going to be in a negotiation where the word is not going to come up.
Yeah.
Secondly, understand what kind of a jab is it. If you say, I just want a fair deal, what have I just done? I've accused you of being unfair. The really manipulative negotiators know how to use it, but also it's what people say when they're being defensive. I just want what's fair is an indicator somebody's being backed into a corner at the same time. So it's so effective either way. That's why it will come up by the people that feel they're losing. And also it's so effective. It's why the people that want to manipulate you with it. I've given you a fair offer. If you don't accept it, you have to accept that you're unfair. Nobody wants that. It throws them off their game. So it's a very emotional word. It has a massive impact. How do I use it?
Yeah.
I get started in a negotiation. I'm going to say, look, I want to make sure that you feel you're being treated fairly the entire time. So if at any point in this negotiation you feel I'm being unfair, I want you to stop me. And we'll go back to that part and we'll fix it. See, what I've just done is I preempted the problem.
Yeah.
I want you to genuinely feel like this is a level playing field. I also know 9 times out of 10, the F word's going to come up. So if I know that's coming and I let it come at me with no preparation of the ground, then shame on me. It's coming. Let's prepare both of us for it so we can navigate it.
You've kind of taken fairness and made it yours, and you brought that into the context of this entire thing, and that you're aware that you're trying to be fair to the other party. That makes sense. You've kind of taken some ownership of the word fair, a desirable word to own in a negotiation.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, Chris, much of this talk has started off between you and I, like two people are negotiating. Of course, there's often that third party thing we're often negotiating about. So is it really wise to jab at another person? For example, if I'm buying a $500,000 fourplex apartment building from you, it seems like, well, maybe I wouldn't want to say, hey, Chris, you're just asking too much for whatever reason. It's just not worth that much. Rather than making it more about the building and like a third party thing and saying, well, you know, the market rents are actually down. So that's why I can't really pay you $500K. I'd love to pay you that, but I'm just looking to get market rent for this. So it's not worth $500K. Is it better to make it about the third party thing or more between you and the other party? Because it seems like that might bring some animosity if it's often between you and I.
Your first step there to make sure that do everything you can so that we stay out of an adversarial conversation. You start going to third party criteria, then you got to have an agreement on third party criteria. Now, What if I don't care what the market rents are? I don't accept that as a criteria. What if I know of a development that's coming into the area? I know there's going to be tax changes. And I know that the present value is no comparison whatsoever to the near future value. Well, I'm just going to say your criteria doesn't matter. Here's a criteria that matters. And we're going to get into an argument over criteria. And my Harvard brothers and sisters really want to bring in outside criteria to settle the deal. Like, it's the facts. Like whose facts you want to use. There's a lot there. Now, I may need to go there at some point in time, but I'm not going to go there early on. And the hard part, I'd love to pay you that much if the rent supported it. Would you really? If the rent supported it, would you still like to get it at the lower price? Of course you would. The astute buyer on the other side, you got to be careful. Let's take it into different realm where, look, instead of saying, let's talk about the rents, just say, look, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't do that with no criteria. Now, that's another gentle way of saying no, because let's say the market rent supported it. If I can show you that the market rent supported it, does that mean that you agree to my price? What if I trap you with your own criteria?
I could have hemmed myself in.
Right. What if the market rent support it, but your budget doesn't? Your real criteria is your budget, not the market rent. So let's take a step back from any criteria and see what kind of a deal we can go to. Now, if the market rents don't support it, you've got an outside criteria that a neutral third party would probably say, yeah, Chris got a point there. It's tough. It's a sequencing issue. I'm not going there before I have to, because there's a risk that I could get trapped by my own criteria. When in point of fact, if the other side is going to accept the criteria, it's an emotional decision anyway. Let's go see what we can navigate more effectively in motions to start with.
So if I'm trying to buy the property from you and I just simply say, I'm sorry, I can't do that with regard to the $500K price, is that wise? Because now I get you talking and perhaps making some concessions, or I can find my way in as to where I might be able to get some concessions from you?
When we coach people on how to say no, that's basically the second way we teach people to say no. There's a friend of mine used to be the general manager for the Los Angeles Dodgers, Ned Colletti, interesting cat.
Yeah,
very successful. His first year as GM, the Dodgers went from worst to first. He might know what he's talking about. Ned's phrase was, I like to let no out a little at a time. So softly letting no out is a great skill. You don't want people to get blindsided by no. You don't want them to be surprised by it. You want them to feel it coming a little bit. Our first way of saying no is with the right tone of voice. How am I supposed to do that? Now, the issue is not what answer they give you. The issue is that question by design stops them in their tracks, forces them to take a look at you and your situation and say to themselves, wow, maybe there's something here I didn't take into account. It makes them see you in a whole new light, which is the point of the question. Actually, less than that. One time at about 50. They're going to say, because if you want the deal, you have to. Now, the good thing about that is you shove them to their limit without them getting angry and storming out, which is every negotiator's job. Find the limits without causing the conversation to blow up. So if somebody looks at you and says, hey, man, because if you want the deal, you're going to have to. And there are plenty of people we've coached in real estate. They are in enough deals that ultimately they get to that. That's when you trigger in. If you really can't do it, that's when you say, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I just can't do that. You haven't put any criteria on the table, which you can be attacked for. It's kind of shocking the number of times that you expect them to say, oh, yes, you can. I know your budget. You're a real estate investor. You got a lot of money. You probably skinned a whole bunch of people. We imagine our amygdala, our imagination imagines them coming back at us with all these answers. We've never had that happen. Like maybe someday that'll happen, but the issue in negotiations is your batting average. You want to raise your batting average. I moved to Vegas just a year ago. I'm not a gambler. I moved here for the tax benefits. And I always use Vegas as an analogy. We don't live in an ivory tower world. There's nothing that works all the time. Nothing. What you need is the best percentage chance of success. These negotiation skills takes you off the table at Vegas where you win 20% of the time to the table where you win 80% of the time. It's your choice which table you want to be at.
Now, when one's in a negotiation, you brought up the term anchoring a little while back. I think of anchoring as that psychological mechanism where with the first person that brings up a price, say if there is no price out there, oftentimes the end negotiation might anchor back more closely to that first price that was brought up. I don't know whether it's wise for one to go first in negotiation or not, or whether it depends. But let me just introduce this, since we have been talking about the sale of a piece of real estate, Chris. In a sense, between seller and buyer, the seller has kind of already begun the negotiation, if you will, because before that buyer even finds out about that property, I can see the price that it's $500,000. I can see this fourplex with 8 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. So therefore, has the seller already kind of gone first in a negotiation, or does that even matter, or who should go first?
If you got something that's priced in advance, it's listed, yeah, the seller's gone first.
Yeah.
Now, the anchoring question is a fascinating one, and my academic brothers and sisters will tell you to anchor, and the top tier negotiators will say he or she who names price first loses.
Interesting, because I thought it would have been up to my advantage to anchor and name a price first.
It's to your advantage on the deals that you made. What about the deals that you blew away from the table? And that's the problem. And that's why the academics love it. And the top tier negotiators, like, I'm horrified that my anchor is going to blow a deal I should have made. And that's why I don't want to leave money on the table. I don't want to not blow deals. And every top tier negotiator, and I can remember, over a steak and a scotch, Coletti and I were talking about this too. It hasn't failed. The people in the business world that are known as the top tier negotiators believe he or she who names price first loses, because the other side goes first. That's information. Great negotiators are data loving people. You go first, you're giving me data. What happens if I like the price? Now I'm like, oh, I can take this and I can let you believe you had your way. This is a really good price for me. And if I get you to emotionally dig in on this price, which you accidentally gave me a great price, you don't even know it, I'm going to make this deal. Now, how often does that happen? How often does it have to happen? I want to make every deal possible. I do not want to lose a deal over price. Dropping an extreme number drives deals from the table that I should have made otherwise. Now, what we do, as opposed to price anchoring, we do emotional anchoring. I will say to you, look, I give you my price, but you're going to hate it. I mean, I'd love to give you price, but it's going to be so extreme that you're going to get angry. You're going to scream at me. I'm scared you're going to get mad. Now I'm going to shut up. So you're going to imagine a price that's worse than what I'm going to throw out. Now, when I do come up with my price, you're not going to get mad at me, because by saying, go ahead, just tell me what it is, you've already braced yourself for news that's going to be worse than whatever I say.
That's a really great technique. You've emotionally anchored me to think about a certain number in my head before any number's been said. Yeah,
because of that survival negative wiring that we were talking about before.
Yeah.
I'm just kicking it into gear to my advantage. I know how it's going to work, so why don't I use it to my advantage?
That is a really great point, and something that I had not thought about previously. Now we might think about sellers in real estate differently. They are the ones that have anchored a price first. So in that case, what might be some other good techniques to get a lower price if you're a buyer without making the seller feel like they were being burned or taken advantage of? Of course, real estate's about more than price, but a lot of people think about price.
I'm going to strip away the negativity about me by calling it out. And especially if I'm coming in as a real estate investor, I'm going to start up by saying, like, look, you probably think I'm just another shark that's here to pick your pocket, cut your throat. Somebody that doesn't care about you. Somebody that is, I'm a marauder, I'm a plunderer, I'm a pirate, I'm a sociopathic killer. What that does is it disarms people. It calls out the negatives in advance. You don't get rid of the elephant in the room by ignoring the elephant or denying that the elephant's there. You get rid of the elephant in the room by pointing it out, by saying, like, hey, there's an elephant in the room. Not only is there an elephant in the room, it's a monstrous elephant. It's fearsome. What do people do? They go like, no, it ain't that bad. It's not that bad. That's brain science backed up. Calling out negatives diffuses them more effectively than denying them. ever will. Calling them out diffuses them every time. The degree that it diffuses them changes based on the circumstances, but it has the same type of effect all the time. So I'm going to start calling out the negatives in advance. I'm going to be very active in going after them because I need you to clear your head. There's a certain reality in real estate. There's a reality of what the market on the pricing, what the near-term predictions are on the market. Generally, a 6-month prediction is pretty accurate. At any given point in time, you're not sure when trends are going to turn around. But the current feel for the market, everybody has access to the data. Everybody has access to the economic data. There's a certain number of things that are not disputable. To make a sale, when someone needs to make a sale, they have to offer a deal, or they can sit on it and watch their value erode. That's the reality. They can sit on it and watch their carrying costs continue to accumulate. That's the reality. To get people to come to reality, you got to diffuse their negativity, their sense of loss, their fears about their future, and their feelings about you.
You're listening to Get Rich Education. We're talking with Chris Voss about techniques for negotiating, especially for real estate investors. We're going to come back more and talk about, is the use of silence wise? Is the use of humor wise in a negotiation? More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Most rental property investors choose either cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market can give you both. Jacksonville, Florida, with 27% lower home prices than the national median, 1% higher gross rents, and Jacksonville has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets over the last 30 years. Get positive cash flow today and appreciation for tomorrow. To invest for cash flow and growth in Jacksonville, go to cashflowandgrowth.com. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They've provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to 4plexes. They're the #1 lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
Hey, this is Dr. Buck Joffrey, host of Wealth Formula Podcast. You are listening to the powerful Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
You're listening to the show that's created more financial freedom for busy people just like you. This is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with Chris Voss, the author of the mega popular book, Never Split the Difference. We're talking about negotiation, since that's such a critical part of real estate investing. And there are certain techniques in negotiations that some might want to employ. These even have names. Chris, I know you like to employ the technique of mirroring. So tell us about mirroring. What is that, and how does that give one an advantage?
Yeah, the hostage negotiators mirror, the business negotiators mirror, the black swan negotiators mirror. You know, it's not the body language thing that everybody's familiar with. You know, it's not they put their hand to their chin, you put your hand to their chin. They lean to the left, you lean to the left. It's not body language nonsense. It's a repetition of 1 to 3-ish words. You teach yourself the skill repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what they just said. When you have done that enough times, then you move it around. You get surgical with your mirror. You mirror what you want to hear more about. It's a great skill that does 2 things simultaneously. It gets the other side talking. Gets them to expand. It's much better than what did you mean by that? Much better. You get a much cleaner download of their actual thoughts. It's also a great skill when you are caught off guard. Like they just said something that just doesn't make sense that your brain has just stopped. If you practice the mirror, it's a great way to buy yourself a whole bunch of time to get your feet back under you. The other side doesn't know you did it because they feel like you're really listening and they want to talk some more. The funny thing about the mirror that I have found really interesting is the few people that are both high IQ and high EQ, and I'm not high IQ. And EQ is learnable. I believe, I worked very hard at my EQ. But the natural born high IQ, high EQ people love mirrors. I think it's because it's so simple and it's so effective. And that type of person loves simplicity and effectiveness combined into one. And I've seen consistently the smartest negotiators, very high IQ people love to mirror all the time, which I get a kick out of. I just do it because I was taught that it worked. Wasn't that quickly attracted to it till I see the really smart people. So I pretend I'm really smart by doing it.
So we're talking about EQ, emotional intelligence, and the technique of mirroring that you use in negotiation. So, for example, if you've got the $500,000 fourplex building you're looking to sell, I want to buy it, say I'm interested in price, I might try to break you down and say something like, well, it looks like the roof only has 5 years of life expectancy left on it. What would you say?
I'm selling, and you're questioning the roof, and you want me to mirror?
Yeah.
Well, I would say 5 years of life expectancy.
Yeah, I'm afraid in 5 years, that's going to wipe out my cash flow for an entire year when I have to replace that roof.
For an entire year?
Yeah, an entire year of my cash flow just 5 years away. So since it's a 30-year roof, can't you share in the expense with me?
Share in the expense?
Yeah, share in the expense of the roof that you haven't replaced.
Sounds like if we work that out, all the other terms would work for you.
Maybe they would, depending on what we agree to on the new roof and how much we're going to share in this expense that I'd be burdened with if I buy the building.
So you're not worried about how much I'm burdened?
You're burdened?
Now you're trying to mirror me back.
No, but you know what? You did something interesting there when you mirrored me a few times, Chris. You got me to say something I didn't plan to say. Maybe you thought that I wanted the entire roof replaced, but after a couple questions, you got me to use the word share. You actually got me down to where now you knew that I was willing to share in the cost of that new roof. And then you knew I wasn't asking you to replace the entire thing. So you actually did manipulate me. Manipulation is probably not the right word, but you did get me to concede when you mirrored me a couple times. And the only reason I mirrored you is because you told me about the technique. So
let me stop you for just a second too, because, all right, so my observation of your tone was that you didn't feel backed into a corner. Have I got that wrong?
You're right. I was being kind of aggressive and going for something.
What I was trying to do is, see, the dynamic was we got into a sharing conversation without counteroffers, without argument, without anybody getting upset. You know, I'm creating a collaborative environment here so that I can get you into this idea without you feeling like you got backed into a corner or drug into it. That's what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to expand the conversation. What we would have seen before is bargaining, offer, counteroffer, accusations, all this kind of stuff, meet in the middle, also the nonsense. I'm trying to take the conversation into an area that's collaborative, but you not feeling backed into the corner. Because if I cause you to feel backed into a corner by taking you there, even if I come out on top, quote, on top in this point, you're going to want to get me back elsewhere. The fear of loss that you talked about before, we got to get people back at least at a 2-to-1 rate of return to feel even. Danny Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, behavioral economics, prospect theory, lost things twice as much as an equivalent gain. So if I get you to make a $5,000 concession, you're not going to feel whole until you've gotten me for 10 someplace else on the 2-to-1 feeling of loss.
Interesting.
That's the hard part about bargaining and conceding, is because we're human beings, it will never feel equitable. And it causes a downward spiral. I want to stay out of that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to trigger enough that's going to get triggered by accident. If we got to get into a back and forth exchange, now I got to worry about how much resentment am I going to trigger where you're going to pay me back, which is maybe you don't pay me back on price. Maybe something comes up in an inspection nobody foresaw. Maybe something's wrong with the property nobody foresaw. That no real estate transaction, just because you got a signed contract, does that mean you're going to close? Anybody's been in real estate longer than 5 minutes know that does a signed agreement to close is a journey.
There are
contingencies
in there every time. Inspections, appraisals, sure.
Right. So, I mean, the beginning of the journey is a signed contract. I got to watch the resentment that gets triggered just get to the signed contract, because if you feel stung, you got to double down on me. And that's why we've all heard of deals, $500,000 deal that goes down in flames over $1,500 inspection.
Right.
How stupid is that?
Oh, yeah.
That makes no economic sense.
$500,000 home doesn't sell because they're in an argument about the $500 refrigerator or something. And then people want to save face, right? People want to save face. Saving face is a big deal in a negotiation. Even if someone loses more money, as long as they save face, it seems like people with a high ego will be more happy with that if they just save face, even if they lose money.
That's exactly right. I don't want to go there. I don't want to lose a deal because I hurt your feelings.
Right.
That's just silly. So let me do everything I could possibly do to preserve your feelings of integrity and autonomy, because I know problems are coming after we get the signed deal. Nothing goes through clean from sign to close. Nothing. So if I know problems are coming, why don't I do everything I can to prepare for them?
Well, some common technique in negotiations is the use of silence. Now, you talked about being inquisitive and asking a number of questions of the other party is generally being a good technique, depending on the negotiation. What about the use of silence? How powerful is that in a negotiation, Chris?
Yeah, it's massively powerful. And silence there are three types of human beings on a planet: fight, flight, make friends. The world splits up pretty evenly into thirds. Doesn't matter if you're Asian, African, Latin, Caucasian, Western European. We got a lot of data that supports this. Fight, flight, make friends. It's the caveman that survived. Silence is a great indicator of who's on the other side, because if you're willing to accept my hypothesis that there are three types, then that means that 2 out of 3 times you're not dealing with your type. 2 out of 3 people you encounter, if the world splits evenly into thirds, 2 out of 3 are not you. Silence is a great indicator right off the bat. The very analytical type loves silence. Gives them a chance to think. In a negotiation, I want to go silent because I want to understand how analytical you are, how you respond to it. The very assertive type, control-oriented. They'll make any deal as long as they feel like they're in control. Think about that. If I get you to feel like you're in control, you're happy with the deal, doesn't matter what the actual economics are. If you felt like you were in control, it's insane. In silence, they want to talk. Love that talker trying to take control. Now I know, oh, wow, this is easy. If I use deference on this guy or gal, I win, because deference makes them feel like they're in control. Now, the relationship-oriented person, silence, they want to talk too, but they're not going to talk about the deal. They're going to want to talk about you. They're going to want to talk about the life. They want to talk about the happiness. They'll make any deal as long as they feel like that the process was fair or that it was amicable. So I could get you to make any deal that you feel is fair and friendly. All of these types have a different criteria that they have to meet other than the economics. So let me use silence to figure out which one it is. Give me a clearer bead of what I need to take to get a signed agreement so that it will go through to close. That's my challenge.
Is part of the beauty of silence is when I'm silent, I'm more likely to get you to talk because I can't be talking then, and therefore I'm gathering information with every minute that you're talking.
Yes, clearly.
I want to ask you about one of the best negotiation lines I think that I've ever heard, because it's easy to remember. It's only 5 words and it sounds really harmless. And yet I think it gets the other party to open up. When one's getting into a negotiation, I like to ask the 5 words, what flexibility do you have? Seems to me like that would make you want to respond with something positively, because you don't want to come up with nothing because you don't want to come off as looking inflexible. Who wouldn't want to do that? So what flexibility do you have? What do you think of that line?
Well, there's projection on your part. Sounds good to you. And some of the time that works really good. And the problem with something that works really well some of the time is we begin to stop paying attention to our batting average with it. So a question by any question at all. And first of all, what I like about it, it's a question that starts with the word what. And by, in general terms, what is a deferential word? And if you're going to ask a question and it's going to be, quote, open-ended, it should start with the words what or how. So the design of the question is really good. It works really well with assertive types because they love to ask what questions. Love them. Works fairly good with accommodating types. Analytical types hate all questions. And we drill down with this with analysts a lot of times. And what they will tell you if you can get them to talk is, because I don't have time to think up an answer that I'm not going to regret later, which is why when you ask an analyst a question, you're not going to get a real answer out of them for 36 hours because they're going to want to think it through every which way, shape, and form before they come up with an answer that's completely perfect so they don't regret it later. That's the way that they think. So we need to gather information, and we need to gather information on flexibility. The same way to approach it is with a negotiation skill that we refer to as a label, and to say with the right tone of voice, seems like there's some flexibility here. Now that's an inquisitive tone, or you could come at it with a calming, soothing downward tone, which is, seems like there's some flexibility here. Either way is easier for all three types to answer, and it raises your batting average. And it goes right at the thing that you were originally designing your question for, which was deferentially getting them to tell you about their flexibility. And that's a great strategy.
Yeah, so analytical types, they don't like questions. Maybe I'm the analytical type then. I'm trying to figure it out because you know what, Chris? We talk here on the show a lot about real estate. It seems like with real estate or items that appreciate in value, a buyer might pay even more than the asking price. When it comes to something of depreciating value, like a car or items at a yard sale, that's when it seems like buyers want to break down sellers on the price. For items that depreciate, the last time I sold my car, I got a pretty tricky question from someone that was interested in buying my car. I think the sale price was $16,000. This person called me on the phone. They didn't ask too many questions about the car. They already got to see the listing there on Craigslist or wherever it was. And you know what this prospective buyer said to me? He said, Keith, I see the $16,000 price. Is that a sticking point for you? I didn't like that. I felt like he was trying to call me some stick in the mud, or if I don't come off the price, like I'm just some jerk that won't budge and I'm being unreasonable or something. Yeah, we just didn't end up making the deal. I thought that set the wrong tone for me when he said, is the price a sticking point for you? I didn't like that. That didn't feel right.
There's two things that I throw out in regards to that. The first one is really, I imagine that the way you said it just now was the way this person said it to you, because that's the way you remember it. Now, that tone of voice in that context kind of implies the things that you just said. You're a stick in the mud. You know, it implies some things, tonality, context-wise, that don't feel great. Occasionally, you can say the wrong thing. If you say it with a different point, like you'd probably likely react quite differently if I had said, is that a sticking point for you? Now that feels differently. Now I can't guarantee you how much of a difference your reaction would be. There'd be enough. Tone is really massively powerful in what it implies. And the way you described it just now, you felt he was calling you a name as opposed to being genuinely curious or really asking for your help. That's a whole different vibe entirely, which is why mastery of tonality will get you more latitude. It's not a guarantee, but it's a great way to get yourself a lot more latitude because everybody's going to say something wrong at some point in time.
Yeah.
It's impossible to not say something wrong. If you really master your tone of voice, that gives you the latitude to make mistakes or to even recover for them. Because if I said it like that and you still felt I call you a name, you might tell me. You might say, you'd let me know that bothered you. If I said it in a curious tone of voice, it's much easier for me to back off and try to repair the damage to the relationship as opposed to me saying it in a way that really like, is that a sticking point for you? You know, that tone of voice says, bozo. You got to be careful about that.
Tone can say a lot. And to me, in the way that was said, is that a sticking point for you? It felt very calculated and it felt manipulative and it just didn't go into a good place. So, Chris, this has been some great stuff, some really concrete techniques that we're getting from you here today. If our audience is interested in learning more about negotiation, how can they learn more about you and what you offer?
All right, subscribe to our complimentary newsletter. It's concise, it's actionable. If you're in the U.S., we got a text to sign up function. You send the words Black Swan Method, not case sensitive, to the number 33777. That's 33777 Black Swan Method. If you're not in the U.S., you go straight to our website, blackswanltd.com. Look for the newsletter, sign up. Plus, the website has got tons of free material on it. You're going to get a long way with the book, Never Split the Difference, and our free stuff. When you're ready to run at a really high speed, we've got some very specialized training for you that is not cheap, but it's also going to be a waste of your money if you're not ready to go there. So the best way to get yourself ready to move faster and faster is to get the book, Never Split the Difference. Sign up for the newsletter.
Oh, this has been great material, Chris. Are there any last thoughts that someone should know about negotiation? Maybe something I did not think about asking you, but should have?
Be willing to let the other side go first. If they can't make you agree, and they can't, then let them go first. Maybe they'll throw out a good deal that you like. You can always take a firm position later on. Hear the other side out first. It will increase your success rate.
They say you make several negotiations every day of your life. So, Chris Voss, thank you for helping each one of us negotiate our lives. It's been great having you here on Get Rich Education.
Thanks, man.
Next time that you see me, are you going to start asking me about where my sticking points are? I guess that would not be a great way to greet me. The thing with Chris is that, see, he doesn't come across as intimidating. He doesn't feel like some shark that wants to bite your leg off. And that disposition is probably the type of thing that would turn people away and make people not want to deal with you if he were an intimidator. And you're going to see this when you watch the video. He comes across as really cool and reasonable. Now, to summarize what he told us here, including a couple things that he told me off microphone, what gets you out of survival mentality, which I often call the scarcity mentality, is pure curiosity. In a negotiation, address up front that your intent is to be fair. If there's an elephant in the room, address that. A nicer way to say no is something like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I can't quite do that." Don't put criteria or a reason why, or that can be used against you. And that right there is something in particular that I learned today. Humor can work in certain negotiations. I learned that off microphone. To get people talking, don't say, "What did you mean by that?" but instead mirror them. Chris likes letting the other side go first. For your tone, he'll also tell you that using a late night FM DJ voice works best. Chris told us that silence is massively powerful. But yeah, that mirroring technique, that's where you repeat the last few words that the other party just said. I wanted to see mirroring at work. Mirroring is that technique that Chris beat me with there in our mock negotiation. And even though I entered into the negotiation hoping that he would pay for the entire cost of the new roof, when Chris started to mirror me, it made me be the one that introduced the word share into our negotiation. And that way he got me to then even think that sharing in the roof cost was actually my idea because I am the one that brought it up first, even though mentally I went into that hoping he'd pay for the entire thing. That was just brilliant on his part. And that's where he got me to make a concession. Yes, it was much like Usain Bolt already crossing the 100-meter dash finish line while I was still back at the 70-meter mark. Or, well, okay, maybe only the 30-meter mark. Chris told us that mirroring is simple and effective. See, I like mirroring for you because it's so easy to remember how to mirror. This is something that you can even remember in 5 years because you just repeat the last few words of what the other party just said. Maybe if you're a property seller who wants to close quickly and your buyer says, I want a separate foundation inspection, so I need a 10-day time extension, well, then you might reply, a 10-day time extension, and then see how the other party reacts. I learned more from this episode than from any other episode here in a long time. Now, how do you raise the rent on your tenant? In my experience, I've found that telling them about inflation on the rent increase notice does not work. A lot of people really don't understand inflation. I found that telling tenants that their rent is going up due to property taxes going higher or higher insurance costs, that tends to work better. What about when the tenant is late with the rent? My favorite line, when the tenant asks about you posting the legal notice about their late payment of rent, is simply to tell that tenant, the law says that I have to. Chris Voss runs the Black Swan Group, so if you want to know more about real estate negotiation or even how to negotiate with your boss for a salary increase or nearly anything negotiation-oriented, you can engage with his resources. If you can't remember how to get Chris's free resources and more, just check the show notes. It's all there, along with more helpful resources. Since this is episode 331, you will find that at getricheducation.com/331. Coming up on the show here in future weeks, how do you obtain financial freedom with as few as 4 rental homes? Yes, you can get $10,000 to $15,000 of monthly cash flow, not gross income, but monthly cash flow from just 4 doors. And you don't have to do anything like convert them into assisted living homes, which would mean you're then running a business. You don't have to do that. You don't have to turn them into higher maintenance short-term rentals either. Yes, a specific formula for financial freedom from just 4 single-family homes rented to long-term tenants. We're going to talk about that coming up on the show. Also, the return of Rich Dad Real Estate Advisor Ken McElroy. We're going to discuss how to find the money for your first real estate deal or even a multi-million-dollar real estate deal. Inventive ways for you to get the money in the first place. Ken and I are doing at least 6 media productions together this year. 2 of those are his appearances right here on the GRE podcast. Again, all the free resources and the notes for this show are at getricheducation.com/331. But yeah, check out Chris and I's mock negotiation video. This is one of those episodes where, since it's about face-to-face negotiation tactics, it can really help you to see he and I together on the Get Rich Education YouTube channel. Until next week, when I'll be back to help you build your wealth, I'm Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.